reach the whole, a thought process that endures today, a conundrum under a naked sun of what to think or when to pray.
You may know us as the Watchers, and we're watching over you. You may find the game is ancient, you might think the game is new. We come from different realms, and we are not all the same. You may know us as the Watchers, but we have our own end game.
Some came with high vibrations to straighten out a mess. Some came for domination in a cosmic game of chess. The final chapter's being written and the dice are being tossed. The game will come unbidden when the game is won or lost.
You may know us as the Watchers, and we're watching over you. You may find the game is ancient, you might think the game is new. We come from different realms, and we are not all the same. You may know us as the Watchers, but we have our own end game.
Do you have a paranormal story you want to share on Night Dreams Talk Radio? You could be a guest. Email us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Hey, that is me. We just lost Calvin. That's the trouble. Sometimes Skype just drops out with no reason. We're going to get him right back, though. So let's get him back on the line so we can, ask him a few more questions here.
Yeah, daggone Skype.
Yeah. Hey, Calvin, are you there? Are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Okay, well, we got you back.
I don't know what happened to the phone.
That happens sometimes. I use Skype. That's why when you mentioned you had Skype, I kind of, didn't respond to that, because I find if you go Skype to Skype, you have more chance of, what just happened. Now, going back to that, when you were on that boat, you're out there and you lost, how many hours did you lose? From 11 to, was that 11 at night or 11 in the morning to 3 in the morning?
11 in the morning to 3 a.m. the next morning.
Boy, that's a lot of time to lose.
That's a lot of time. And it was a pretty wild ride. And the thing about it, I think they have the power to wipe your memory out until it gets jogged and something brings it back. But I knew things wasn't right. Now, what I don't understand, like I say, I didn't think we had had caught any fish at all. And the next morning, this friend of mine he said, "Did you catch any fish?" I said, "No." And he opened the cooler and it was full of fish. So I don't understand that. and I thought I was losing my mind.
Well, can I ask you a question? Were you out drifting with the boat, or were you anchored, or how were you out there?
No, I was anchored. I was pulled up to a little island called Cat Island, and actually the water was fairly shallow there, and I was just going to anchor and wait for the tide to come in and fish a rising tide. And the boat was in the same spot when I got up where I left it, I guess, because it was dark in.
Well, I mean, wow. And how big a boat was this, Calvin?
Oh, it wasn't but about a 22-foot boat. Had a 100-horsepower motor on it.
Wow. I mean, when you realized something wrong at 3 o'clock in the morning, I mean, were you in a total, like, dismay? Like, how am I going to explain this to my wife? Like, hey, I went out at 11 o'clock in the morning. Now it's 3 o'clock in the morning. That's a long time to, account for being gone.
And she knew I was supposed to be home before dark. But on the other hand, I've always told her, don't panic. You might break down, somebody pull you in. But if I'm not there at a certain time, to call the Coast Guard. And it just so happened when I walked in the house, the door, well, she'd done been down and left a note on my truck. And when I walked in, she said, I was just picking up the phone to call the Coast Guard. I was worried to death about you.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, I don't believe it done me much good. I got a lot of rest, I think.
Wow. And did you have any bruises on your body or anything like that from that experience? Something that you couldn't account?
I did. I was bruised. It looked like I'd been in a bar fight and got the living daylights beat out of me several times. It was just a bad. Even my eyes was. When I come in, I had to take my fingers and hold my eyes open to even see how to get in. And then I was bloody from her blood and my blood. And I had to be a scary situation walking in on my wife like that.
Yeah.
But it was something that I didn't understand at the time. I didn't know how I got there. And I was just fishing. And now, if I'd been the type to go out to bars and drink and roam around, that'd been a different story. But I never did. I never have. Every now and then I might drink a beer or something. But I never have been a drinker or nothing.
Interesting. It sounds almost like when you were abducted the last time that they got really aggressive with you.
Well, they did, because I got aggressive with them. And like I say, if I could have found a door, I would have wrapped my arm around her little skinny neck, and I jumped out the door, and I wouldn't have cared how far down it was or where I landed. Because I was going to have my evidence this time. That's what's so frustrating about the whole deal. You can go through this, things will happen, but you can't tell nobody because nobody's going to believe you. That was the way I was looking at it. Back in the 70s and the 90s, you just didn't tell nobody nothing like this. Nobody would have believed you if you had told them. Up until here recently, I had no idea what an alien was. Well, I knew something happened. But, until that happened, I had no idea in 73 what an alien was or a spacecraft was. Now, you couldn't convince me now that it didn't happen because when I came up, we just had 3 channels on TV, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And you didn't watch shows like they got now, like The Walking Dead and the History Channel and stuff like that. There just wasn't nothing on. You had Disney, and then you had, if the president talked, you was going to watch him on all 3 channels. So it was just a mess.
Well,
nobody knew nothing like that.
Well, because I started broadcasting talk radio back in 1976. We didn't even get into really talking about UFOs. It wasn't a subject people would talk about. They were talking about, ghosts. They were talking about, monsters. They were talking Bigfoot, witchcraft, and all that stuff. It didn't happen really to like the late 80s. And then all of a sudden, I started getting people calling up about UFO sightings. And then in the 90s, I started getting phone calls from people saying they were abducted by aliens and telling me their stories. I hate to say it, I can weed through when I don't want to sound bad, and I'm not picking on a group of people, but when I get somebody on my show that says they were abducted and they were talking telepathically with somebody, that there's 25 million cloaked UFOs circulating Earth to protect Earth, I kind of, at that point, kind of like, hey, everything they're saying, I'm just not even taking it seriously. Because if they're protecting Earth and it takes 25 million cloaked UFOs to protect Earth, why aren't they doing something to help us? I don't believe it. But what scares me is when I get somebody on it says they were abducted, they were taken aboard a spaceship, they had, something prodded into them, they had, all kinds of things done to them. That is the scary part. And I can tell because a lot of people, you can feel the pain when you talk to them. Even after it's happened 5 years ago or 10 or 20 years ago, you can still feel their pain. I don't know if you can, James, but I sure can.
Oh, definitely. I definitely can feel their pain, like Timothy calling the other night. And even Calvin, you can definitely feel the pain. It's something, like he says, the physical pain goes away, but the mental, it stays with you.
And it does. It hangs in there all the time. I have, since I've been going to these conferences, I've had people show up on my doorsteps here. I don't know how people get your address and all, and I really don't mind. I'm glad to talk to anybody. But, you get some people that's way out there sometimes. and who am I to say I don't believe you? But some of them I don't believe myself. I mean, even though my story is way out there, theirs was a little further than what mine was. And I have to say, there's some people I just don't believe. But then there's a lot of them that I do believe, too.
Now, have you, since your first book and now your second book is out, have you had any, what you think maybe government officials or anybody, contacting you or watching you or anything? Have you ever had any of those type of feelings?
I used to get a gut feeling that somebody was watching, but I think that was just my paranoia. I know I asked Paul Hynek the other day, that's John Allen Hynek's son, and we did a couple of shows together with George Knapp. I said, does a man in black really exist? He said, oh, yeah, they do. And he's pretty knowledgeable on things because his daddy was knowledgeable and he was knowledgeable. And I spent about a week with him in Phoenix, Arizona at UFO Congress. And he is such a great guy. I mean, he's just such a down-to-earth person. And we did a lot of talking. And he said it's definitely the man in black out there. Matter of fact, he is the History Channel. He's a consultant for Project Blue Book on the History Channel now. And he had told me he's even going to do a little acting role one time. He said, now the show's not 100% accurate what they did it. He said, I don't think my mom ever slept with a Russian lesbian spy. Like they got it on there. But he's such a pleasure to be around. And I've met a lot of people like him, and George Knapp. He's knowledgeable. He's met a lot of people. It's so many believable people out there, investigators that want to know the truth.